Tonight, New York City and the East bracing for a major winter storm. Also tonight, bomb threats targeting multiple state capitals. First tonight, this cross-country storm bringing snow, rain, strong winds to much of the East. Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City. Potentially the biggest snow in New York City in nearly 2 years. Rob Marciano standing by to time this out. The deadly explosions in Iran. At least 95 people killed, more than 200 wounded. 2 explosions minutes apart. The victims attending a memorial for a top Iranian general killed in a U.S. airstrike 4 years ago. Martha Raddatz with late reporting she's in the Middle East. In the U.S. tonight, those bomb threats targeting multiple state capitals. Authorities at this hour investigating who is behind the hoax. Outside New York tonight, authorities on the scene. The religious leader shot and killed outside his mosque in Newark. Witnesses describing the suspect tonight. The passenger plane that collided with another plane while landing in Tokyo bursting into flames. Tonight, we have learned what the pilots on that passenger jet had been told just before landing. Matt Gutman in Tokyo. Here at home, the crisis at the border. House Speaker Mike Johnson and fellow Republicans in Eagle Pass, Texas. And tonight, President Biden now blaming Republicans for holding up funding for border security. Matt Rivers from the border. Just in tonight, former President Trump asking the Supreme Court now to overturn Colorado's decision to remove Trump from that state's ballot. Rachel Scott in Iowa. In New York City tonight, many hospitals reinstating masks inside their hospitals amid troubling new signs, the rise of respiratory illnesses, flu and COVID. Tonight, the major fire breaking out at the home of an NFL star, firefighters on the roof. The man accused of stealing a plane from Las Vegas and flying it all the way to California. And the championship late today watched by so many, the most unlikely player being cheered on, trying to become the dart champion, and his secret.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a very busy Wednesday night. We do begin tonight with this powerful storm sweeping across the country, set to slam the east. New York City among the major cities now bracing for this. A coastal storm, snow, rain, ice, heavy winds. Depending on the track, it could become the first significant snowstorm in 2 years in the city. The system right now in the west, moving into the southern Rockies, then the plains and across the south. And then by week's end, that snow, rain, possible flooding, potentially damaging winds in much of the east, right up I-95. Powerful waves tonight in Pacific California and all along the west coast. High surf alerts from San Francisco to San Diego. 10 states at this hour already under winter weather alerts. More than a foot of snow already in California's Sierra Nevada mountains. Tonight, New York City and several major cities preparing for what could be a rain-snow mix and the shifting track that could determine everything. Let's get right to senior meteorologist Rob Marciano leading us off tonight with the latest track. Hey, Rob.
Hi, David. Our long-range models have been pretty consistent with bringing at least a plowable snow here in the Northeast. And the last time we saw that was February back in 2022. The low itself is over the Great Basin right now. We've got winter storm warnings that are posted for the New Mexico area, maybe up to a foot there. It gets into Texas Friday morning. Heavy rain from Dallas back through Houston. Snow above I-40 and then I-64. I think just a few inches as this thing progresses north of the Ohio River Valley. Heavy rain in the southeast comes Saturday morning. Then it begins to run into marginally cold enough air for snow as it rolls to D.C., Philly, New York. Snow, anywhere from 2 to 8 inches of it. Strong winds, some coastal flooding. But the exact amount of snow will be determined by the strength and the track of this low as it approaches over the next few days. David?
You'll be with us all week on this. Rob, thank you tonight. The major story overseas this evening, the deadly explosions in Iran. 2 explosions just minutes apart, killing nearly 100 people at a memorial for a top Iranian general who was killed in a U.S. airstrike 4 years ago. You can hear the sound there of one of the blasts, followed by the screams and a chaotic rush to get away. General Qasem Soleimani had been the mastermind behind a militant network, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. Tonight, so far, no one has claimed responsibility. The U.S. this evening saying they see no indication that Israel was involved, but it comes, of course, just hours after a targeted killing in Beirut. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz in Israel tonight.
Tonight, a powerful bomb blast, triggering panic on a crowded Iranian street, followed just minutes later by another explosion, killing nearly 100 people and wounding more than 200. Emergency workers tonight still gathering the dead from the largest terror attack in that country in more than 40 years. Iranian officials say a pair of bombs placed in bags were detonated remotely at the commemoration marking the death of Iran's former top general, Qasem Soleimani, killed by an American drone 4 years ago today. Soleimani, considered the mastermind behind an Iranian-backed network of militia groups that included Hamas and Hezbollah. Iranian officials immediately accusing Israel and, quote, criminal America of the attack, saying Israel will pay the price. But U.S. officials say there is no evidence Israel was involved. Our Mary Bruce pressing the White House.
Can you rule out that Israel had anything to do with this?
We have no indication at this time at all that Israel was involved in any way whatsoever.
It comes just a day after officials say an Israeli drone targeted a top Hamas official in Lebanon. Salah al-Aruri killed along with several others in this Beirut building. Hezbollah's top leader calling the strike a serious and heinous crime that will not go without punishment. The U.S. saying it was not told in advance of the strike.
So let's get right to Martha Raddatz. She's live in Tel Aviv tonight. Martha, back to the deadly bombings in Iran today. You and I both traveled inside Iran, reported there. We know how revered that Soleimani was in that country. Who does the U.S. tonight think is behind the attacks?
David, a U.S. official saying tonight that the assumption is that ISIS planted the bombs because it looks like the kind of attack that the terrorist group has carried out elsewhere. But, David, as you know, Iran will almost certainly continue to blame Israel. David?
Martha Raddatz back in the region for us, reporting live from Tel Aviv tonight. Martha, thank you. Meanwhile, back here in the U.S. tonight to the bomb threats targeting at least a dozen state capitals. Emails claiming explosives were, quote, well hidden and that people would end up dead. Evacuations ensued as teams then swept through buildings in multiple states. Tonight, authorities now investigating who is behind this hoax. Here's ABC's Steve Osunsami from Georgia, one of the states rattled by these threats.
With political stakes and tension so high, authorities today had to take the threat seriously. A bomb threat called into at least a dozen state houses across the country, sending law enforcement officials sweeping for explosives that they did not find. People were running from state capitals in Montana, Kentucky, Michigan, Georgia, and others. Federal investigators tonight say that the email that triggered it all came from outside the country. The note sent to lawmakers was just a few sentences saying that the explosives were well hidden and that people would end up dead.
I'm not even sure what would motivate somebody to do something like that could potentially result in loss of life.
In Maine, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows had a similar incident happen on Friday where someone called police to her home for no need. It was less than 48 hours after she decided that former President Donald Trump needed to be removed from the state's primary ballot.
What happened today against the Capitol, or what happened at my house on Friday night, they're designed to make people afraid, to send a message.
The FBI says that in this environment, even when the threats appear to be fake early on, they still have to take them very seriously. David?
No question about that. Steve Osunsami tonight. Thank you, Steve. Outside New York City this evening, Newark police are searching for the gunman wanted for a shooting and killing of a religious leader. Police say Imam Hassan Sharif was shot outside his mosque just after morning prayers in Newark. Witnesses describing a suspect wearing all black running from the scene. Investigators now going through security camera video. Authorities late today saying so far this does not appear to be a hate crime. We turn now to that passenger plane that landed colliding with another plane, bursting into flames in Tokyo. Well, tonight authorities have now revealed that the pilots on that passenger plane had been cleared to land right beforehand. As you remember, the passenger plane then erupted into a fireball after colliding with that other plane. The charred aftermath, and incredibly, all 379 people on the larger plane escaped. 5 people on the Coast Guard plane did not survive. ABC's Matt Gutman on what was revealed just today by investigators in Tokyo.
Tonight, Japan's government releasing the potentially damning transcript of the communications between air traffic controllers and pilots moments before Japan Airlines Flight 516 slammed into a Japanese Coast Guard plane at 5:47 p.m.
Japan 5 and 6 continuously. Please rise.
The logs show that at 5:43 p.m., 4 minutes before the collision, air traffic control instructed the Japan Airlines jet to continue its approach. 5:45 p.m., air traffic control clearing the Japan Airlines jet to land. 10 seconds later, air traffic control instructing the Coast Guard plane to proceed to a holding point on a taxiway to the runway. The Japanese Coast Guard says they were given permission to enter the runway. Another focus of the investigation, the runway warning lights, called stop bar lights, that tell pilots whether a runway is clear. But those lights hadn't been working since December 27th.
They didn't have those lights, and so somehow that crew in that Japanese Coast Guard aircraft believed that they were cleared onto that runway.
Within seconds, Japan Airlines Flight 516, carrying 379 passengers and crew, crashed. The fireball almost instantly incinerating the Coast Guard plane. About 1,000 yards down the runway, that's where Flight 516 came to rest. All that's left now are the wings and parts of the engines. Inside the airliner, the cabin filling with smoke, 5 of the plane's 8 emergency exits unusable. But the crew funneled nearly 400 people through the 3 remaining exits. Tonight, we interviewed another captain.
Does it seem communication? Yeah.
Communication problem between air traffic control and the pilot of the Coast Guard?
Yes, sir. I think so.
David, and those stop bar warning lights, which would typically tell a pilot to avoid an active runway, have not been functioning here since December 27th. But that pilot we spoke to said that was likely not the major factor here. The issues, he said, were likely the miscommunication between air traffic controllers and those pilots, and the fact that that Japan Airlines pilot could very likely not have seen the much smaller Coast Guard plane in the moments before he landed here. David.
And as you reported, cleared right beforehand to land. Matt Gutman in Tokyo again tonight. Matt, thank you. Back here at home into the race for the White House, late today, former President Trump officially asking the Supreme Court now to overturn the decision by Colorado Supreme Court to remove him from the ballot there. Trump wants the nation's highest court now to ensure he will appear on primary ballots across this country. And in Iowa tonight, Ron DeSantis, and the moment with the voter there asking, with Trump 30 points ahead in Iowa, why won't DeSantis take Trump on more directly? Here's Rachel Scott tonight.
Tonight, Donald Trump formally calling on the Supreme Court to throw out a Colorado court's ruling blocking him from appearing on the state's ballot. That Colorado court citing the 14th Amendment, which bans an officer of the United States who swore an oath to the Constitution and engaged in insurrection from holding office. Tonight, Trump's lawyers arguing the president is not an officer of the United States, adding what happened on January 6th was not insurrection, and President Trump in no way engaged in insurrection. Finally, Trump asking the Supreme Court to return the right to vote for their candidate of choice to the voters. Here in Iowa, voters will soon have their say. Trump leads by 30 points. And today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pressed on why he isn't hitting Trump harder.
Why haven't you gone directly at him? Polls are down. He's, up really hard.
What do you mean by going directly after?
I mean, you're in my viewpoint, you're going pretty soft on it.
I think the narrative is this. I think what the media wants is they want Republican candidates to just kind of like smear him personally and kind of do that. That's just not how I roll.
Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, polls show former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley pulling into second place and now finding herself the target of new Trump attacks.
Gotta say I love it because I know that means he sees what we're seeing. But literally, these temper tantrums that he's having and these commercials that I'm seeing that you're watching, every one of them is a lie.
And David, President Biden is expected to travel to 2 deeply symbolic places to draw direct contrast with Donald Trump. On the 3rd anniversary of January 6th, the president will deliver remarks near Valley Forge, that historic site where George Washington commanded the troops during the Revolutionary War. And then on Monday, President Biden expected to speak inside that historic black church in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 people were gunned down by a white supremacist. His campaign says this is meant to send a message about what's at stake this election. David.
Rachel Scott in Iowa. Thank you, Rachel. We turn now to the migrant crisis. Amid a record surge, House Speaker Mike Johnson and fellow Republicans at the border in Eagle Pass, Texas today, saying America is at a breaking point, pressuring President Biden to accept Republican proposals to fix it. Tonight, President Biden now blaming Republicans for holding up funding for border security. Matt Rivers from Texas now.
Tonight, amid a record number of border crossings, House Speaker Mike Johnson and 64 House Republicans touring the southern border, descending on Eagle Pass, Texas, to demand stricter immigration policies.
One thing is absolutely clear. America is at a breaking point with record levels of illegal immigration.
December reaching that record high. Sources telling ABC News there were 302,000 migrant encounters. And until changes are made to border policies, Republican lawmakers are vowing to hold up emergency funds for Ukraine, Israel, and the border. H.R. 2, Secure the Border Act, would resume construction of the border wall, change who qualifies for asylum, and limit the Department of Homeland Security's ability to grant migrants parole.
Our position is very clear, and we have made that clear again for 7 months. H.R. 2 is the necessary ingredient. Why? Because it has provisions that fix each of these problems, and these things work together.
And today, senators on Capitol Hill working to strike a bipartisan deal.
We're making progress. We're closer than we have been, but this is a very difficult issue.
Overnight, President Biden placing the blame on Republicans, saying without funding, his hands are tied.
You gotta do something. You gotta give me the money I need to protect the border.
David, tonight, the Department of Justice announcing it is suing the state of Texas to block the implementation of a tough new immigration law here, giving state officials the right to charge immigration crimes. As that battle plays out, though, migrant processing facilities like this one behind me here in San Antonio continue to deal with record numbers. David?
It'll be a major issue in this race for President Matt Rivers tonight in Texas. Matt, thank you. When we come back here in New York City tonight, many hospitals reinstating masks because of what they're now seeing at the hospital. The rise of respiratory illnesses, flu, and COVID. And then the major fire at this hour at the home of an NFL star. Tonight in New York City, the rise in respiratory illnesses forcing all New York City public hospitals to reinstate mask policies. The city's health commissioner says masks will be required at 11 hospitals, 30 health centers where patients are being treated. Hospitals now in at least 8 states reinstating mask requirements. 31 states were experiencing high or very high levels of respiratory illnesses, including COVID, flu, and RSV. In South Florida tonight, a major fire breaking out at the home of Miami Dolphins star Tyreek Hill. Smoke pouring from the house about 30 minutes outside Miami. Firefighters on the roof there. Some family members were home at the time. The team says Hill, seen wearing a boot on his injured ankle there, left practice when he heard about the fire. We've been told everyone got out safely. When we come back here, the suspect accused of stealing a plane flying at 100 miles across state lines and what they're seeing in the Great Lakes tonight. To the index of other news, police arresting a suspect for allegedly stealing a small plane and flying at 100 miles from Las Vegas to Barstow, California. Police say he stole the plane, then landed it right here on a road near the airport. Authorities say Damian Zoukaitis was caught trying to run off into the desert. They believe he tried to steal several other planes last week. New signs of warming in the U.S. The Great Lakes had the smallest amount of ice cover on New Year's Day, less than they have had in at least 50 years. Only 1/3% of the Great Lakes under ice, usually about 9% by now. When we come back tonight, would he become the dart champion of the world? The final moments just before we came on tonight. Finally tonight here, he had millions cheering him on. The most unlikely competitor trying to become the dart champion of the world. Tonight, the most unlikely matchup being watched by millions late today. The young man trying to become the dart champion.
Tops.
The 16-year-old darts phenom from the UK, Luke Littler, making history as the youngest player ever to win a match at the World Dart Championships in London.
Oh, still a 16. Oh, my word.
Then winning 6 matches in a row to compete in the finals late today.
It's just unbelievable. To even think I'm in the final. Stick to the routine that I'm always doing.
His routine, a ham and cheese omelet for breakfast, a pizza for lunch. The 16-year-old sharing this video of himself back in 2008, playing darts already at 18 months old and in a diaper. Growing up south of Liverpool and Manchester tonight, his friends in the UK, St. Helens Darts Academy, cheering him on. They call him Luke the Nuke.
It's his debut. Got no nerves because he's young.
The 16-year-old Luke facing off against another Luke, 28-year-old champ Luke Humphreys, trying to defend his title. The two going 13 sets, and the older Luke holding on. He would win, but not without witnessing that meteoric rise himself. The two congratulating each other, and the runner-up Luke tonight winning $250,000.
Talk about a 16-year-old, it's crazy to think about.
Almost made it. Omelets and pizza sounds good to me. Try again next year. I'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.